A single handbell could freeze an entire hallway in the 1950s. Inside the classroom, chalk dust floated over rows of bolted desks, pencil shavings gathered beneath the wall sharpener, and the American flag stood where every child could see it. These rooms were strict, patriotic, and filled with objects that would puzzle students today. Some vanished without notice. But one item on this list, number 8, could get a teacher fired now. Before ballpoint pens took over, many school desks had a small round hole cut into the upper corner. That was for an inkwell, and beside it, a child might keep a fountain pen, blotting paper, and a nervous hand. Writing was slower then. Press too hard, and the nib scratched. Move too fast, and wet ink smeared across a perfect line. Many students left class with blue or black stains on their fingers, cuffs, and sometimes their homework. By the late 1950s, cheaper ballpoint pens made ink bottles seem old-fashioned, messy, and unnecessary. But another classroom object was about to disappear too, one that helped teachers show students the whole world. At the front of the room, the teacher could tug a cord and send a large map snapping down over the chalkboard. In one motion, the blackboard became the United States, the oceans, or a Cold War world divided by borders many children were expected to memorize. Students learned states, capitals, rivers, continents, and distant countries from the same hanging display. If a boundary changed, the map usually did not, so geography could be slightly out of date before the school year even ended. Later, overhead projectors, roll-up screens, televisions, and digital maps made the heavy pull-down map less necessary. Still, nothing announced a lesson quite like that sharp snap from the front of the room. Behind that map was the real center of the classroom, the chalkboard. Lessons appeared there one line at a time, in squeaking strokes of white chalk that left dust on the teacher's sleeves. Arithmetic problems, spelling words, diagram sentences, homework reminders, and punishment lines all passed across that black surface. When the board filled up, a student might be chosen to clap the erasers outside, sending chalk dust into the air like smoke. Over time, schools replaced chalkboards with whiteboards, dry erase markers, and then smart boards. They were cleaner, brighter, and easier on allergies. Before any student could copy from the board, though, they needed one small tool at their desk. A pencil with a dull point meant a trip to the hand-crank sharpener, usually bolted near the door or beside the teacher's desk. Students lined up with yellow pencils in hand, waiting for their turn at the little metal machine. You pushed the pencil in, turned the crank, and heard that rough grinding sound as the blades chewed the wood down to a clean point. The tiny drawer underneath filled with curled cedar shavings and graphite dust. Electric sharpeners made the ritual faster. Mechanical pencils made it unnecessary. Laptops pushed pencils even farther aside, but anyone who used one can still hear that crank right before the classroom filled with strange purple pages. Then came the mimeograph sheets, damp to the touch and printed in that unmistakable purple ink. Teachers pulled them from the duplicating machine and handed them out while they were still warm. The letters sometimes looked fuzzy, the edges smudged easily, and the paper curled slightly in your hands. Before reading a single question, many students lifted the page close to their faces and breathed in that sharp chemical smell. It was part alcohol, part ink, and completely tied to schoolwork in the 1950s. Photocopiers, classroom printers, and digital handouts eventually replaced the messy process. But once those purple pages were passed out, students needed something to carry them home in. So what did they use? They often carried those papers in a metal lunchbox, along with a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a piece of fruit, and a thermos that rattled in its holder. These boxes were sturdy, heavy, and easy to spot by the dents along the corners. Some had cowboys, cartoon characters, or television heroes printed on the sides. Others were plain plaid, but still carried with pride. In a crowded hallway, the handles clanked like tools in a work shed. Soft lunch bags, cafeteria programs, safety concerns, and plastic containers slowly pushed them aside. But before anyone opened lunch, the school day usually began with a ritual every child knew by heart. Before pencils moved, many classrooms rose to their feet. Students stood beside their desks, faced the flag, placed a hand over the heart, and recited the Pledge of Allegiance in unison. In the 1950s, this was more than a morning habit. Post-war patriotism, fear of communism, and lessons in citizenship all met in that brief ritual. Teachers expected order, clear voices, and respect for the flag at the front of the room. The pledge still exists in many schools, but participation is no longer treated the same everywhere. Court decisions strengthen protections for students who choose not to join. And next comes the item many viewers remember from The Hook. The paddle was often not hidden in a drawer. It could hang on the wall, plain as a clock, a a flat piece of wood that every child in the room understood. Some had holes drilled through them, supposedly to make the swing faster and the sound sharper. In many 1950s communities, this was treated as ordinary discipline. A student who talked back, fought, or refused directions might be sent to the principal, where the punishment could be physical and immediate. Parents did not always object. Some expected the school to handle misbehavior that way. Today, that paddle would shock many classrooms before it was ever used. In many schools, striking a student could bring lawsuits, termination, and the loss of a teaching license. But control did not always need a paddle. Sometimes it came through the perfect curve of a letter. On many desks, penmanship was its own daily workout. Students sat upright, feet placed correctly, arms positioned just so, then filled lines with loops, slants, ovals, and repeated letters while the teacher walked the aisles. The influence of Palmer-style handwriting was still strong. Copybooks showed the ideal form, and children were expected to match it with steady spacing and clean movement. A graceful, cursive page could bring praise. A messy one could bring embarrassment. Typing classes, computers, standardized testing, and crowded curricula later pushed handwriting drills aside. Schools still taught writing, but not as a moral exercise in patience, order, and self-control. Those lessons also appeared in small classroom books about manners, speech, and proper living. Few books shaped the 1950s classroom image more than the Dick and Jane readers. Their pages used clean illustrations, simple sentences, and familiar figures. Dick, Jane, Sally, Spot, and Puff. The language was built for repetition. See Jane Run was not just a sentence, it was a decoding drill. Children met the same words again and again, until reading felt predictable, controlled, and safe. Over time, these books lost their place. New reading theories favored richer language, and critics pointed out that Dick and Jane showed a narrow, polished version of American childhood. That same polished order appeared in the furniture too, especially in the desks that fixed every child into place. The desks often made the lesson plan before the teacher said a word. Many were wooden or metal with the seat attached to the writing surface, built for one child and one direction. Some classrooms bolted them to the floor. Others lined them in rows so straight that every student faced the blackboard, the flag, and the teacher's desk. Your place was assigned, and movement usually required permission. That arrangement supported recitation, handwriting drills, and silent work. It did not invite group projects or learning stations. Modern classrooms use movable chairs, shared tables, and flexible corners for reading or discussion. But in the 1950s, order was built into the furniture. Then came the sound that controlled the day itself. The bell decided when every lesson ended. In many 1950s schools, a teacher's handbell called children in from recess, while hallway bells marked lunch, class changes, and dismissal. One sharp ring could send chairs scraping, lines forming, and voices dropping without a long explanation. That sound gave the whole building one shared rhythm. Children learned to stop, stand, wait, and move together. Today, automated tones, intercom announcements, classroom phones, and flexible schedules have changed that soundscape. The old bell is mostly gone, along with the instant obedience it demanded. Thanks for watching. In the comments, tell us which vanished classroom object taught the biggest lesson beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those vanished objects left more than memories. They taught patience, manners, routine, patriotism, fear of consequences, and pride in small achievements. Not all of it should return, but much is still missed. Thanks for watching. Comment with the classroom object you remember most, and subscribe for more nostalgia-driven history.